The world woke up to a shock that rippled far beyond the Caribbean, as news spread of United States military strikes on Venezuelan targets, an action that immediately stirred emotions, memories, and deep political anxieties across continents. In capitals around the globe, officials scrambled to respond, weighing every word carefully, aware that statements made in the first hours could shape alliances and harden divisions for years to come. For some governments, the strikes revived old fears about the return of unilateral military power and the fragility of international norms that were built after decades of global conflict. Others framed the events as an inevitable consequence of prolonged tension, sanctions, and failed diplomacy, arguing that the crisis had been building for years. In Latin America, reactions were especially intense, shaped by a shared history of intervention, resistance, and regional solidarity that still runs deep in public consciousness. Several governments in the region expressed alarm, warning that military action against Venezuela could destabilize neighboring countries and worsen an already fragile humanitarian situation. Voices from across South America emphasized the need for dialogue, stressing that violence would only deepen suffering for ordinary Venezuelans. In the Caribbean, leaders spoke with caution, mindful of economic ties, migration pressures, and the risk that conflict could spill into nearby waters. European nations responded with a mix of concern and restraint, calling for de-escalation while reaffirming their commitment to international law and diplomatic solutions. Some European officials warned that the strikes could undermine ongoing efforts to encourage political negotiations and reforms within Venezuela. Others focused on the broader implications, noting that such actions set precedents that could be invoked in future conflicts elsewhere in the world. In Moscow, the response was sharply critical, with statements condemning what was described as a violation of sovereignty and a dangerous escalation of tensions. Russian officials framed the strikes as part of a wider pattern of Western interventionism, arguing that global stability was being sacrificed for short-term strategic gains. Beijing also expressed serious concern, urging all parties to exercise restraint and emphasizing the importance of resolving disputes through peaceful means. Chinese commentary highlighted the risks to global markets and energy supplies, warning that instability in Venezuela could have far-reaching economic consequences. In the Middle East, reactions were colored by regional experiences with foreign military action, with some leaders expressing empathy for Venezuela's position. Others viewed the strikes through a strategic lens, analyzing how shifting alliances and power balances might be affected by the unfolding crisis. African nations, many of which have long advocated for non-interference, issued calls for respect for sovereignty and international cooperation. Several African diplomats warned that normalizing military solutions would weaken the global system that smaller states rely on for protection. International organizations moved quickly to respond, with urgent meetings convened to assess the situation and discuss possible next steps. Calls for emergency sessions echoed through diplomatic channels, reflecting widespread anxiety about the potential for rapid escalation. Humanitarian groups raised alarms about the impact on civilians, stressing that any military action would likely worsen shortages of food, medicine, and basic services. Aid organizations emphasized that Venezuelans had already endured years of hardship and that further instability could push millions more into crisis. Global financial markets reacted nervously, with investors weighing the risks of prolonged conflict against the already volatile state of the world economy. Energy analysts pointed out that Venezuela's role in global oil markets meant that disruptions could affect prices far beyond the region. In Washington, officials defended the strikes as necessary, arguing that all other options had been exhausted and that decisive action was required. Supporters of the decision framed it as a message of strength, intended to deter further actions deemed threatening to regional or international security. Critics within the United States, however, questioned the long-term strategy, warning that military force without a clear political plan could lead to endless entanglement. Debate intensified across American media, with commentators divided over whether the strikes would bring stability or deepen chaos. In Venezuela, reactions were marked by fear, anger, and uncertainty, as citizens braced for what might come next. Government supporters denounced the attacks as aggression, calling for national unity in the face of external pressure. Opposition voices expressed concern about civilian suffering, even as they criticized years of political mismanagement that had left the country vulnerable. Social media platforms filled with images, statements, and conflicting narratives, reflecting how information warfare now accompanies modern conflict. Across the globe, ordinary people reacted with a mixture of shock and fatigue, many feeling that the world was sliding toward yet another prolonged crisis. For some, the strikes reopened old wounds from past interventions, reinforcing skepticism about promises of quick resolutions. For others, they underscored a belief that unresolved political crises, when ignored too long, often end in force rather than compromise. As hours turned into days, the dominant theme in global reactions remained uncertainty, with few confident predictions about what the strikes would ultimately achieve. Diplomats emphasized that the coming period would be critical, urging restraint to prevent a broader confrontation. Behind closed doors, intense negotiations were rumored to be underway, as governments sought to contain the fallout and protect their interests. Analysts warned that miscalculations on any side could quickly spiral, transforming a limited action into a wider conflict. The situation also reignited debates about the effectiveness of sanctions, diplomacy, and international mediation in resolving deep-rooted political crises. Many observers argued that the strikes should serve as a wake-up call for renewed diplomatic engagement rather than a prelude to more violence. Others feared the opposite, cautioning that once military force is used, the path back to dialogue becomes far more difficult. As the world watched closely, one reality became clear: the reactions to the U.S. strikes on Venezuela revealed not just opinions about one event, but deeper divisions over power, sovereignty, and the future of global order. In that sense, the response was as much about the state of the world today as it was about Venezuela itself. And as voices from every corner continued to speak out, the unfolding story remained unresolved, suspended between escalation and the fragile hope that reason might still prevail.